After my husband's burial, I forced myself to attend my mother's grandson's first birthday party, still raw with grief. That's when she looked me straight in the eye and announced, "This child belongs to your husband. By right, half of that $800,000 home is mine now." She even waved around a supposed will. I wanted to laugh in her face, but all I managed was a quiet, "I see." My name is Captain Elise Monroe. I'm 34 years old, a decorated Marine officer, and a widow I never expected to become. 3 months earlier I lost my husband, Major Daniel Monroe, to a sudden brain aneurysm after 11 years together. I could barely stand to breathe, let alone socialize, but I went to that small family gathering for Lucas, the boy I thought was simply my nephew. Instead, my mother, Marjorie, dropped a bomb on me, claiming Daniel fathered him, and that I now owed her half my home. What she didn't know was why I could hardly hold back my smile. Daniel and I first crossed paths 12 years ago at a charity auction for wounded veterans. I was stationed nearby and had been asked to volunteer, arranging donated items. He noticed me admiring a watercolor of Boston Harbor at sunset, fiery orange blending into violet, and when bidding started he drove the price up higher than anyone else. When the gavel fell, he walked straight to me, placed the painting in my hands and said with that crooked grin of his, "A view like this belongs with someone who understands it." That was Daniel, attentive, kind, and impossibly selfless. We had our first date the next evening, and from then on, it felt like we'd known each other through every deployment and every homecoming. Daniel was sharp, principled, and humble, the kind of Marine who remembered the names of every clerk and doorman. 8 months later he proposed on the harbor, the real skyline glimmering just like the painting that brought us together. After our first anniversary, we stretched our savings and purchased a Victorian in Beacon Hill. It cost $800,000, but Daniel had just been promoted and I was beginning to make a name for myself consulting on military housing projects. The house had high ceilings, solid beams, and a small backyard garden where I pictured our children one day playing. But those children never came. We tried. We fought for it. We endured specialists, procedures, and 4 grueling rounds of IVF that hollowed out both our finances and our hope. I still remember that last attempt failing. The car ride back from the clinic was silent. Daniel's hand found mine on the console, and that was all either of us could manage. Later that night, rocking on the porch swing, he kissed my temple and whispered, "Elise, you and me, that's enough. That's everything." And he meant it. We rebuilt. We traveled between deployments. We poured our hearts into our work and into restoring that old house one room at a time until it gleamed. Daniel pushed me to start my own consulting firm. He believed in me more than I believed in myself. Life wasn't what we'd pictured, but it was ours. My mother, Marjorie, lingered in the background of it all. She had always been unpredictable, dramatic, and envious of my stability. While I was climbing the ranks and designing housing plans, she was drifting between jobs and men. Our family spent years rescuing her from the fallout of her own choices. She never hid her resentment. If I succeeded, she had to remind everyone where I had supposedly fallen short. When I married Daniel, she suddenly took an interest in Marines. When we bought our house, she spent months whining about her cramped apartment. 2 years ago, she latched onto Tyler, a bartender with tattooed arms and a motorcycle that made her feel young again. Their relationship burned hot and cold, constantly collapsing and restarting with shouts and slammed doors. And now, standing in that party full of balloons and frosting, she was claiming her chaos extended into my marriage. Thanksgiving of the year before Daniel passed, my mother stunned everyone by standing at the head of the table, dabbing her eyes with a napkin and declaring she was pregnant. Theatrics had always been her style, but even so, the announcement landed like a thunderclap. I forced a smile while inside my chest tightened. After years of surgeries, tests, and failed treatments, Daniel and I had quietly let go of the dream of children. And now here she was, practically flaunting the miracle we'd begged for. I swallowed the bitterness and decided I'd play the role of supportive daughter. When Lucas arrived that spring, 8 pounds 4 ounces, strong lungs and all, I was at the hospital with flowers in one hand and a hand-knit blanket I'd poured months into. I tried to be present, to be helpful. Mom struggled from the start, calling me at all hours about sleepless nights and Lucas's colic. I stepped in as much as my military schedule allowed, sometimes keeping Lucas overnight so she could get a reprieve. Daniel was always polite when she brought the baby over, but he kept his distance. At the time, I assumed it was because watching me cradle another woman's child scraped against his own private grief over our infertility. Then came the Tuesday morning that destroyed my world. Daniel woke with a sharp headache, rubbing his temples. I urged him to stay home to rest, but he brushed it off. Just a migraine, Elise. I've got an important briefing. He kissed me goodbye and promised to call after. That call never came. The phone that rang instead was from the base hospital. By the time I arrived, he was gone. A brain aneurysm. 36 years old. Nothing anyone could have done. The days that followed blurred together. Flags, folded uniforms, condolences I could barely register. Through it all, my mother was conspicuously absent. She sent excuses. Lucas was sick, no sitter available. At the funeral, she appeared only briefly, eyes darting everywhere but mine, slipping out before the reception. I was too broken to care, too numb to question it. A week later, Lucas's first birthday landed on the calendar like a cruel joke. The last place I wanted to be was a house filled with balloons and laughter when all I could feel was the gaping wound of Daniel's absence. But family duty gnawed at me, and my father's steady voice on the phone echoed Daniel's words. Family comes first. So I went. I drove to my mother's rented bungalow in a rundown part of town, a neatly wrapped gift riding shotgun beside me. My face was pale, my eyes ringed with exhaustion no concealer could hide. I hadn't slept properly since the funeral, my nights spent staring at the cold indentation of the pillow beside mine. When I pulled up, the street was already lined with cars. I gripped the steering wheel, forced deep breaths, then grabbed the gift and approached the house. A woman I vaguely recognized, one of Mom's friends, Jenna, opened the door. Her eyes flickered with something almost like guilt before she forced a smile. Elise, you came. Her tone was off. Too tight. She leaned back, gesturing me inside. Everyone's in the backyard. The house was strung with blue streamers and cheap balloons. A banner stretched across the wall. Happy first birthday, Lucas. Strangers crowded in the kitchen, whispering until they noticed me. Then silence. Their eyes followed me as I walked through, a widow on display. In the backyard, my parents sat stiff at a picnic table, clearly out of place. My father stood the second he saw me, relief washing over his face. Elise, he said, pulling me into an embrace. We weren't sure you'd come. Of course I came, I murmured, setting the gift on the table. Where's the birthday boy? With your mother, my own mom answered, eyes sliding away from mine. They'll be out soon, for the cake. The air felt wrong. Conversations halted as I moved past. Strangers glanced at me, then away, like they were waiting for something to happen. I told myself it was pity. People never know how to behave around someone newly widowed. But I had no idea what was really about to be unleashed. Half an hour dragged by, each second heavier than the last, before my mother finally appeared from inside the house. She was radiant in a new dress, hair freshly dyed, a smile tugging at her lips as if this day belonged to her and her alone. Lucas bounced happily on her hip, dressed like a miniature gentleman in a bow tie and tiny shirt, kicking at the air while everyone cooed. She set him into his high chair, straightened her shoulders, and the entire backyard seemed to hush under her command. She tapped her glass with a spoon, the clear ping slicing through the chatter. Thank you for coming to celebrate my son's first birthday, she began, her voice unusually firm, practiced, almost theatrical. This past year has been filled with trials, as you all know. Uneasy glances darted between guests. My father shifted beside me, my mother stared down at her shoes. A knot tightened in my chest. Something was wrong, very wrong. I've been keeping a truth to myself, she continued, placing a hand on Lucas's small head, and after everything that has happened, I can't hide it anymore. Her eyes locked on mine. My blood chilled. Lucas is not Tyler's child. She paused, letting the words sink in, then delivered the blow. He belongs to Daniel. The world tilted. A wave of gasps rose and fell around me. My father stiffened as though bracing for impact. But all I could hear was the roar in my ears. My mother, on Lucas's first birthday, was claiming my late husband fathered her child. Her voice didn't waver. She spoke with the poise of someone who'd rehearsed in the mirror. Daniel and we had a lapse in judgment 2 years ago. It wasn't planned, it wasn't meant to hurt anyone. But life is complicated. Lucas is the result of that mistake. I stood rooted, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. The nephew I had rocked to sleep, bathed, and loved as if he were my own, now declared my husband's son. The claim was so grotesque, so wildly absurd, that a laugh pressed against my throat. But she wasn't done. She reached into her purse with a flourish and produced a folded document. Daniel knew. He updated his will before he passed. He wanted his son cared for. This will states Lucas is entitled to half of their house. Every head turned toward me. I could feel the weight of their pity and curiosity drilling into my skin. My father half rose from his chair, his face a storm of anger and disbelief. My hands trembled, not from devastation but from the sheer audacity of it all. And then, to my own surprise, I smiled. Not joy, not kindness, but the sharp smile of someone who sees through a poorly staged performance. I pressed my lips together, stifling the laughter that threatened to break loose. "Oh, I see," I said evenly, taking a deliberate sip of water, buying myself control. "May I look at this will?" The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes was delicious. She hadn't expected calm. She hadn't expected composure. Slowly she handed me the page. One glance told me enough. The language was clumsy, sloppy. Not the clean, precise writing Daniel used in every legal draft he brought home. And the signature, close but wrong. The A flowed into the D like an afterthought, the final stroke exaggerated, almost cartoonish. A forgery. I folded the page carefully and returned it to her. "Thank you for showing me this." My tone was polite, almost disarmingly so. "I think I'll be going now." "That's it?" she asked, her composure finally slipping. "You're not going to say anything else?" "Not right now," I replied smoothly, picking up my purse. "This is Lucas's birthday. We'll talk later." I kissed my father's cheek, promised my mother a call, and walked out as though nothing had happened. Behind me, the whispers rose into a storm, shredding the party atmosphere into tatters. Once inside my car, I locked the doors, dropped my head back against the seat and finally let go. The laughter burst out of me like a dam breaking, wild, uncontrollable, tears streaming down my face. Because only someone truly desperate would think I'd ever believe a lie that sloppy. Not tears of joy, but a jagged mix of grief, fury, and stunned disbelief at the audacity standing in front of me. Because Cassandra had no idea about the truth Adam and I had guarded more tightly than anything else in our marriage. Her lie wasn't just cruel, it was biologically impossible. It all began 3 years before Lucas was even born. We'd invited Cassandra over to celebrate what was, at the time, her longest stretch of employment yet. Adam cooked his signature lasagna, we opened a good bottle of wine, and for once the night felt light. But when a client called me with a design emergency, I excused myself to the study. 20 minutes later, when I returned, the air in the dining room had shifted. Adam looked uneasy. Cassandra was sitting far closer than when I left, her hand resting casually on his forearm, her laugh a little too forced, a little too practiced. At first I brushed it off. Cassandra had always been touchy and the wine had been flowing. But that night, Adam sat down on the edge of our bed and told me the truth. "She made a pass at me," he said, voice steady but eyes clouded. "Complimented me in a way no sister-in-law should. Suggested I deserved someone who really understood me. He made it clear he'd shut it down immediately." Cassandra had laughed it off, called him sensitive, tried to make it sound like a joke. But Adam wasn't laughing. I was hurt, yes, but not shocked. Cassandra had a long history of testing boundaries. We agreed to treat it as an isolated incident, something fueled by wine and poor judgment. But it wasn't isolated. Over the following months, Cassandra kept pushing. A brush of her hand when she thought I wasn't looking. Texts that straddled the line between casual and flirtation. One afternoon she even showed up unannounced at Adam's office, asking him to lunch. Each time Adam stood firm, told me immediately, and distanced himself. When we finally confronted my parents about her behavior, it backfired spectacularly. They insisted Adam must be reading too much into things, that Cassandra only admired him as a brother figure. My mother, well-meaning but blind, suggested Adam might even be flattered by the attention. The implications stung. That night Adam and I made a decision. We wouldn't create a scandal, but we would create space. Invitations declined. Family events attended only together. And after one particularly suggestive midnight text, Adam blocked her number entirely. Then came the health crisis that changed everything. Adam had been suffering with pain for weeks before finally seeing a urologist. The diagnosis: a varicocele. Treatable but serious. Surgery was scheduled, and while it went smoothly, the doctors advised an additional step: a vasectomy. Given the risk of complications recurring, it was the safest choice. It wasn't easy to accept, especially after years of failed treatments and heartbreak over children we'd never have. But Adam's health came first. We agreed, and the vasectomy was performed 2 years before Lucas was even conceived. We never told a soul. Not our friends. Not even our parents. After years of invasive questions about our fertility struggles, we'd learned to guard our privacy like a fortress. The only people who knew were Adam, myself, and his doctors. I still remember Adam sitting in our garden days after surgery, an ice pack balanced discreetly, his expression dead serious. "Cassandra's not done," he warned. "Someday she might try something bigger. Something desperate." I chuckled at the paranoia, tried to wave it off. But Adam wasn't joking. Within a week, we were in our family attorney's office. James Wilson listened carefully as Adam laid it all out: Cassandra's advances, the surgery, the risks. James's advice was simple but firm. Document everything. Keep the medical records. Save the messages. Make a record of her behavior. "You'll likely never need it," he said, "but if she ever tries to stir trouble, you'll be glad you did." And so we did. A file tucked away full of evidence. A shield Adam had quietly built years before my sister would ever step onto her porch with a forged will in her hand. After Adam's funeral, every step forward felt like walking through quicksand. And yet, the morning after Cassandra's outrageous stunt at Lucas's birthday party, I found myself driving straight to the bank with a resolve I hadn't felt in weeks. The manager knew Adam and me well. He'd seen us often over the years, signing papers, joking with each other, building the kind of life we thought we had decades left to enjoy. His expression softened when he saw me. Without a word, he guided me into the vault and left me in a small, private room with the steel safety box Adam had insisted we keep for emergencies. When I opened it, my breath caught. Inside was what Adam had once jokingly called our disaster kit. Only there was nothing funny about it now. The first thing I pulled out was his real will. Properly notarized, airtight, leaving everything to me exactly as he had promised. Next were his medical records, the ones detailing his vasectomy performed 2 years before Lucas was conceived. The biological proof that Cassandra's story was a fabrication. Beneath that lay a thick stack of notes. Adam's journal, page after page of dates and details about Cassandra's unwanted advances. He had recorded everything. The comments, the text messages, even the time she showed up at his office uninvited. There were printed screenshots of her late-night texts. And finally, a letter from our attorney confirming he had witnessed Adam's legitimate will. At the very bottom was an envelope addressed to me in Adam's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Elise, if you are reading this, then I'm gone. God, I hope it's decades from now and Cassandra's nonsense is nothing but an old family joke. But if not, if she has tried to hurt you, know that I did everything I could to prepare for this. Use what's here. Protect yourself. I know your loyalty, how much you believe in family even when they don't deserve it. But you deserve protection too. You deserve peace. I love you beyond time, beyond words. Whatever comes next, know I am with you." By the time I finished, my tears blurred the page. Even from the grave, Adam was shielding me. I tucked everything back except what I needed. The notarized will, copies of the medical records, and a few choice pages from Adam's journal. Then I drove straight to James Wilson's office. James had been Adam's mentor years ago, and his law firm carried that weight of old Boston prestige. The receptionist greeted me softly, calling me Mrs. Preston, as though the formality itself was a comfort. James stood as I entered, his silver hair catching the light, his expression lined with grief. "Elise," he said gently, taking my hand. "Adam was one of the rare ones. I'm so sorry." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. And now, it seems he was right to prepare for Cassandra's schemes. I laid out everything. The party, the so-called will Cassandra had brandished, the stunned faces of my parents and friends. James's brows furrowed as he studied the document. "Sloppy work," he muttered. "This wouldn't fool a first-year paralegal, much less a judge. But the fact that she attempted this at all is a serious red flag." I slid Adam's real will across the desk, along with the medical records and journal. James's eyes sharpened as he read, his voice firm when he spoke again. These medical files alone make her claim impossible. The vasectomy was 2 years prior to Lucas's birth. Adam cannot be the father. This is an open and shut rebuttal, legally speaking. My voice cracked when I asked, so what do I do? I don't want to drag her through the mud, but I won't let her steal half my life with a forgery. James leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. Elise, someone doesn't go this far unless they're desperate. There's a reason behind this fraud, financial or otherwise. To find out, we'll need eyes on her. Discretion is key. He recommended a private investigator the firm often used. Frank Delaney, an ex-detective with a reputation for cutting through lies without getting tangled in them. James dialed him on the spot, and within the hour Frank was at the office. He was a stocky man, mid-50s, with a Boston accent that clipped his words like he didn't have time for nonsense. He listened quietly as James summarized the situation, then looked at me with sharp, unflinching eyes. "Don't worry, ma'am," he said, flipping open a battered notebook. "If your sister's hiding something, I'll find it." Dr. Chin didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice steady but kind. "Elise, my job isn't to tell you what to do. It's to help you see the choices clearly. What I hear is that you're torn between protecting yourself and protecting your nephew. But those aren't mutually exclusive. Lucas needs stability. He needs safety. And frankly, so do you." Her words lingered long after I left her office. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Adam's disaster kit spread out before me. His real will, the medical records, the journal, all of it was ironclad. Legally, I could crush Cassandra's claim in court without breaking a sweat. But every time I imagined Lucas growing up with his mother in jail, the bile in my throat thickened. The following day, I called James and Frank back to my house. I made tea I didn't drink, pacing the living room as they laid the evidence out again. "If we take her to court, it destroys her," I said, staring at the stack of papers. "If I do nothing, she'll try again in some other way. There has to be a middle ground." Frank tapped his pen against his notebook. "You've got leverage. Use it. Show her everything. Proof of the vasectomy, the notarized will, even her own text messages. Put the fear of God in her, but stop short of pressing charges. If she's smart, she'll back off." James nodded slowly. "We can also draft an agreement. Cassandra signs a legal retraction of her claim to Adam's estate. In exchange, you agree not to pursue charges. That protects you, and it protects Lucas from the fallout." It was ruthless but also merciful. Exactly the balance Adam himself would have struck. 2 nights later, I asked Cassandra to meet me at James's office. She arrived late, her makeup flawless, her smile brittle. She walked in as though she owned the place, tossing her hair back like this was just another one of her petty squabbles. But when James slid the folder across the table, her face drained of color. "What is this?" she muttered, flipping through the copies. "The vasectomy records. The notarized will. Her own text messages printed in black and white." "It's the truth," I said evenly, my voice steadier than I felt. "And the truth makes your little performance at Lucas's party impossible to sustain." For once, Cassandra was speechless. She looked at James, then at Frank, then at me. You wouldn't actually take this to court." I leaned forward. "I would. And I will. Unless you retract your claim and sign a statement saying Adam was never Lucas's father. You do that and I won't press charges. You walk away clean and Lucas keeps a mother who isn't behind bars. Those are the terms." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I saw the flash of fury, the instinct to argue, to manipulate. But then she caught sight of Frank watching her like a hawk, and the fight drained out of her. Finally, she whispered, "Fine." James slid the agreement across the desk and Cassandra signed it with a trembling hand. When it was over, she wouldn't look at me. She just snatched her purse, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out. I sat back in my chair, exhausted, relieved, and heartbroken all at once. Because while I had protected Adam's legacy and our home, I knew something else too. My sister and I were finished. Whatever bond had once existed between us had been buried alongside my husband. Cassandra's mouth fell open, the smug composure she'd carried into my living room unraveling by the second. She flipped through the notarized pages, her hands shaking as though the paper itself burned her. "That can't be real," she whispered. "It is," I said firmly. "And unlike the forgery you paraded around at Lucas's birthday party, this one would hold up in any court in the country." Every signature verified. Every page witnessed. Every clause airtight. Adam left everything to me, his wife. Not you. Not Lucas. Me. Her eyes darted to the recorder on the table, then back to me. I leaned forward, my voice calm but cutting. You've woven a pretty story, Cassandra. Hotels, late nights, whispered promises. But your details don't add up. The timeline doesn't match Adam's work schedule. You can't recall room numbers, menus, or even what nights you supposedly met him. You can't fake intimacy when you never had it. Her confidence cracked, and with it the truth bled through. I needed help, she blurted. Her voice trembled, desperation leaking through the cracks in her performance. The debt, the rent, the medical bills. You don't understand what it's like to be drowning. You've always had everything handed to you. No, I said, sharper than I intended. I built my life. Adam and I fought for it, sacrificed for it, survived heartbreak together for it. You don't get to erase that because you're desperate. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. For the first time, I saw not the schemer who had tried to forge my husband's will, but the frightened, reckless girl who had always looked for shortcuts, who had always believed the world owed her more than she was willing to earn. I slid another document across the table, printouts of her text messages, the ones Frank had uncovered. She froze. You didn't just make a mistake, I said. You planned this. You bragged about it. You involved friends in creating a forgery. That's fraud, Cassandra. That's prison. She looked up at me then, eyes wide with fear. You wouldn't actually turn me in, would you? That depends on you, I replied evenly. Here's your choice. Sign a legal statement retracting your claim and swearing Adam was never Lucas's father. Or I take this evidence to the police and the courts. If you care about staying out of jail and keeping custody of your son, you'll sign. Right here. Right now. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Cassandra's trembling hand reached for the pen. Her eyes flickered with guilt, but also something softer, maybe the first glimpse of honesty I'd seen in years. For a second she looked like the little sister I used to protect on the school playground, before resentment poisoned everything between us. Maybe not, she murmured, staring at the floor. But you made it look that way. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. She left quietly, shoulders slumped, her footsteps fading down the walk. I stood at the door for a long moment after she was gone, the silence of the house wrapping around me like armor. The next evening we sat across from James in his law office, Cassandra signing her confession with a trembling hand. Every clause, every stipulation, every condition was laid out in black and white. There would be no more gray areas for her to hide in. For once, accountability was not optional. That weekend my family gathered for dinner in the dining room that had hosted so many milestones before Adam's death. The air was thick with tension, my parents' eyes darting between us as Cassandra stood, clutching her prepared statement. Her voice shook as she admitted the truth, that Adam had never betrayed me, that her will was a forgery, that Lucas was not his son. Gasps rippled through the room. My mother covered her face with her hands. My father's jaw tightened, shame etched into every line. When she finally sat down, silence reigned. Then quietly but firmly I spoke. Adam was loyal. Always. He deserves to be remembered that way. And Lucas deserves stability, not lies. For the first time in months I felt the weight on my chest begin to lift. Not gone entirely, but lighter. I had defended Adam's memory. I had protected myself. And I had given Lucas a chance at a future untouched by Cassandra's bitterness. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the house was still again, I sat in Adam's old study, the painting of the Boston skyline hanging above the desk. I thought of him, of his foresight, his quiet strength, his unwavering love. He had left me the tools to face this storm and I had survived it. I whispered into the silence, I hope I made you proud. And for the first time since his death I believed I had. I cut her off, sharper than I intended. No, Mom. This is not all working out for the best. Don't you dare diminish what she did to me, to Adam. An apology doesn't erase months of plotting or the fact that she tried to rip apart everything we built. The room went silent. My father shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't argue. Cassandra just stared at her hands, shame written in the slump of her shoulders. I'm holding her accountable, I continued, softer now. Not because I want revenge, but because Adam deserves better than to have his name dragged through the mud. And Lucas deserves better than to grow up in the shadow of lies. This agreement is the only reason I'm not pressing charges. It's not forgiveness, it's structure. Cassandra gave a small nod, her voice barely audible. I'll follow through. For Lucas. Good, I said firmly. Because if you don't, I will not hesitate to protect myself legally. This is your last chance. For the first time in years, I felt like I had taken back the power Cassandra had chipped away at with every jealous remark, every reckless decision, every attempt to pull me down to her level. That night, after my parents left in uneasy silence and Cassandra slipped away without meeting my eyes, I sat alone at the table staring at the small recorder. The red light still glowed, proof of every word spoken. I pressed stop, slid it into its case and exhaled a long, shaky breath. Adam had always told me I was stronger than I believed. For the first time I was starting to believe it too. On the anniversary of Adam's passing, I placed fresh flowers by his photo on the mantel and sat quietly in the garden he had loved so much. The air was cool, the daffodils vibrant, the world moving forward even if my heart sometimes still lingered in the past. I thought about the journey of the last 12 months. The crushing grief, Cassandra's betrayal, the painful unraveling of family illusions, and the painstaking work of setting new boundaries. None of it had been easy. But standing there I realized I had not just survived, I had grown. Adam's foresight, his love, and his faith in me had carried me through the darkest hours. His meticulous preparation had protected me when I could barely protect myself. And in honoring that, I had found a strength I didn't know I had. The strength to confront betrayal, to choose compassion without surrendering to manipulation, and to carve out a healthier future for myself and for the people who depended on me. Lucas toddled across the yard that afternoon, chasing a butterfly with squeals of delight. Cassandra watched from the porch, quieter than I'd ever known her, a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Maybe she was changing. Maybe not. But for now she was trying, and that was enough. As for me, I no longer measured my worth by keeping the family together at any cost. I had learned that true family isn't about pretending nothing is wrong. It's about facing the truth no matter how ugly and building something better on the other side. I pressed the locket Adam had given me against my chest, its weight a steady reminder of the love that shaped me, the boundaries that saved me, and the future still waiting to be written. I whispered into the breeze, almost to him, almost to myself. I'm okay, Adam. I really am. By the time spring returned, I realized I wasn't walking this road alone anymore. The grief group I had joined after Adam's funeral, 12 strangers linked by loss, had quietly become my lifeline. Week after week we sat in a circle sharing stories nobody else wanted to hear, and somehow, those evenings stitched my broken edges back together. What began as hesitant confessions grew into friendship, the kind that only comes when you've seen someone at their most undone. 3 months after confronting Cassandra, I launched the Adam Preston Foundation for Legal Education. Scholarships for young students who dreamed of practicing law but didn't have the means. It gave me purpose to watch his legacy shape futures he would have been proud of. Support came from places I never expected. Adam's old colleagues checked in regularly, inviting me to dinners, refusing to let me disappear into isolation. My college roommate Sarah flew in from Chicago once a month, sometimes just to sit with me on the couch watching bad movies and eating takeout. Those quiet weekends reminded me what love between friends could do, hold you steady when your whole world feels like it's slipping. And then there was Michael. We met at a fundraiser for the foundation 6 months after Adam passed. A professor of ethics at Boston University with a quiet humor and gentle patience that felt familiar, but not in a way that tried to replace what I'd lost. At first we were just friends. Coffee after meetings, long talks about books, about life, about grief. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, dinners followed. It wasn't what I had with Adam, and it never would be. But it was something else, something cautious, hopeful, and real. Michael understood that Adam would always be part of me. He didn't try to erase that truth. He respected it. That morning in the garden, as sunlight spilled over the daffodils Adam had planted, I reflected on all the lessons I'd been forced to learn. Adam's careful planning had shielded me when I was most vulnerable. His journal had given me proof when others dismissed my pain. Even in death, his love continued to protect me. But I had learned something about myself too. That setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's survival. That documentation isn't just paperwork. its power. That forgiveness doesn't erase betrayal. It simply loosens its grip so you can keep moving. And most of all, that sometimes the people you thought you could lean on are the very ones you need distance from. I was not the same woman I had been before Adam's death or Cassandra's betrayal. I was scarred, yes, but stronger, clearer, more willing to speak truth even when it shattered the illusion of family harmony. Pain had forced me into a strength I hadn't known I carried. I whispered into the breeze as if Adam might still hear me. You couldn't have known what waited after you were gone. But somehow you prepared me for it. The ache would never vanish. But for the first time I understood that grief could exist alongside hope. That love doesn't end with a heartbeat. It endures, reshaping itself into memory, guidance, and quiet resilience. If there's one truth I carry from this ordeal, it's this. Family is not defined by blood but by respect. Protect yourself. With boundaries, with honesty, with proof if you need it. The people who truly love you will honor those lines. The ones who don't, they were never safe for you to begin with. So tell me, have you ever had to draw hard boundaries with family?